This is Irish Illustrated Insider. It's February 8th. I'm Tim Priester with Tim O'Malley from Irish Illustrated and Pete Sampson from The Athletic. Notre Dame had a interview session last week. Marcus Freeman, Brian Polian, Tommy Rees, Mike Elston. We heard from Brian Kelly. We weren't allowed to ask him questions, but a lot came out of that, right, Tim? We got plenty of stories.
Gonna say I got one more. I got one more to bleed out of Polian, Jack, a little later. So
yeah, I think I'll be bleeding a few more out of that. But it was beneficial. It was good to get a chance to talk to Marcus Freeman, talk to him about his philosophy, talk to him about terminology with positions. Let's start with him and what your impressions, guys, were of him.
I thought Freeman was outstanding. I think you saw kind of everything that would lead you to believe he's going to be a great recruiter, easy to relate to with players. I think easy to relate to with fans, if that matters. Saying that, every day you find out how special or unique this place is. You can get anybody on the phone that you want as far as a prospect goes. I mean, I think it just sort of backed up what people have probably been telling me over the last month, that one, you're going to love this guy and he's going to be a huge hit at Notre Dame.
I think this is a good time to remind everybody when they say, do we want to bring in someone for Marcus Freeman because he's obviously wants to be a head coach? Remember this moment when he walks in, gets Tyson Ford to commit. Everyone already loves him. He's going to be a good defensive coordinator. He'll be a head coach someday. You always want the next Marcus Freeman to join your program.
Yeah.
Ask Alabama and any team that gets great coordinators to come in. He was as advertised, right? We figured he would be the perfect fit in terms of what Notre Dame needed in the recruiting room, and he said the only thing I wanted to hear was, I'm tailoring my scheme to match my players. That's just making him a smart man that will always be a good coach.
Yeah, I think it was pretty easy for Notre Dame fans to like him, and they did. I haven't heard anybody that said he didn't handle the interview process with the media well. I mean, he clearly gets Notre Dame. He said way too many things about Notre Dame for him to be oblivious to what Notre Dame's all about. I mean,
to be just like he was coached to say something good about Notre Dame, he was very much.
Yeah, no, it was very insightful, and I thought that was good. That was the first thing that struck me. Again, everybody likes to hear Mike Elston talk about what a Tiger he is. We have that story up on the website today at Irish Illustrated. Clearly a tenacious recruiter. And if you've seen video of him during practice sessions when he was at Cincinnati, he's also very aggressive on the practice field too, in a real positive way, encouraging way. And Tim, I agree with you. I mean, you want to hear him say, look, we're going to tailor our defense to the personnel that we have. There are going to be multiple schemes. There's evidence out there already that he will mix and match more than Clark Lee even with his defenses.
The best part about it is it's really a commentary on Clark Lee, though. He didn't have to overhaul it. Like, I've always kind of blamed Brian Kelly for that first year where he came in and he said, we're going to run this up-tempo offense, and I am not going to use my running backs, and I'm going to have Dane Chris throw to all these guys. There was never going to work, except he had to overhaul everything anyway, so you might as well overhaul, right? Marcus Freeman's coming in. He's like, I don't need to overhaul this. Like, these guys have played some really good defense.
To do that.
So I think there's a mild advantage there for him. It's a commentary on Notre Dame's defense. Like, if you were to come in, if Marcus Freeman came in 2017, he'd be like, we're overhauling everything. This is what we're going to do. We're going to be a 3-down team, but he doesn't have to do that this time.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing that I think he said where I was like, okay, was like the fact that Notre Dame was an easy decision. Because I think that in talking to people around Notre Dame, there was a time where they thought that he is sort of slipping away and going to LSU. I mean, I think that he had a serious decision to make when it came to deciding between Notre Dame and LSU. And now, I mean, that was really one of the things that I wanted to ask him about, was just about learning to sell Notre Dame and how you sort of hit the high points of a place you've only been working at for a month. Because I think that he certainly has, when I talked to Tyson Ford about it, I mean, he mentioned that Freeman talked a bunch about the decision between Notre Dame and LSU and ultimately what got him to go with Notre Dame over LSU. And that was very impactful.
I hear what you're saying, because LSU won the national title in 2019. And so and I'm sure that they offered a little bit. I know that they offered a little bit more money than Notre Dame. But I mean, I think he's genuine when he talks about the fit for Notre Dame, and that.
Sure, I agree with that.
Him and his wife were sold 5 minutes after Brian Kelly began talking about it. I mean, I think he was inclined to feel more of an affinity for Notre Dame than he would LSU. And, Brian
Yeah.
Kelly played up on that, and Notre Dame played up on that. And I think it also has a lot to do with, I asked him about when Mike Denbrock recruited him for Notre Dame back in early 2000s. And he basically said that had there not been such a strong pull, such a strong draw for his family to Ohio State, Notre Dame would have been right in there. And I don't know if he said they would have won per se, but
Well, he said his mind was made up when he came to Notre Dame. He was going to go to Ohio
yeah,
State. That
yeah,
makes
right,
it tough.
exactly. So, yeah, so that's a good fit, and that looks good. Enjoy every minute of him because the clock is already ticking on him. But I think he's going to do a really, really nice job for Notre Dame on several fronts. We also spoke with Brian Polian. Brian Polian, a big defender of Brian Kelly and the recruiting process. I said that day that it sounded very choreographed, and it was. Pete, you can speak to this. I mean, obviously it got under their skin to hear from the Athletic that Tyson Ford said he received multiple calls from Lincoln Riley and none from Brian Kelly. So it was a big defense of Brian Kelly, and Brian Polian led that charge.
I mean, it was definitely pointed. There's no doubt about that. Obviously, Tyson Ford said what he said, and I wrote what I wrote. And I haven't heard one person from Notre Dame say that was inaccurate. So I'm fine with that. I don't know. It felt like the Elston Polian part of Wednesday felt like more like a college lecture or a coach's clinic. And then the Reese Freeman part of Wednesday felt like its own thing almost. Whereas like Polian and Elston were very much like trying to come to the defense and like explain like why things work, why things might be harder than you think. Elston's commentary about less than half of prospects being able to get in was interesting because I sort of took that and you think back about some of the prospects they took in 2010, 2011, 2012, and it would lead me to believe that they've sort of changed what's admissible and what's not. Because I think you would go back to those prospects. I mean, look, Lewis Nix came from a public school in Jacksonville and has said multiple times that academically Notre Dame, he was underwater immediately. I'm not so sure that Notre Dame is going after prospects with that academic background anymore based on how difficult the experience is for those players. And I've had multiple former Notre Dame coaches reach out to me and be like, well, this is kind of a weird less than half dynamic where they're like, unless something's changed, they felt like when they were here, Notre Dame could do more than half, quite a bit more.
But I think less than half also, and he didn't spell it out this way, less than you have to be able to have of those less. Okay, let's say you can do 60. Let's say you can bring in 60 of the top 100. How many can you get past the initial conversation that want to come to Notre Dame? And then you're down to 40 or 30, and then you're at less than half. Does that make sense? What I'm saying, like,
yeah,
you certainly can't get every top prospect from a public school that does not project to Notre Dame to go up to the admissions office and say, I think I can get this player in and he wants to come. I would see how there's less than half of those as opposed to could they conceivably get in? I think, of course, there's more than half that could conceivably get in.
Yeah. I would agree with that because you have to go back to what Brian Polian was talking about with the vetting process. Well, so when it's all done, when you do the vetting process and who wants to actually come to Notre Dame, I mean, it is less than 50%. And a couple people took shots at Elston because they said he was making an excuse. He was asked a question.
Yeah. Well,
he was asked how many, and he said less than half. He wasn't trying to offer an excuse whatsoever. He answered a question.
I think that if the question was more, I guess, tuned to like how many in the top 100, how many players would you look at and say like these guys fit Notre Dame?
That would be
right. Fit is a huge word.
And he might have answered that. He might have been answering that in his answer.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
I think I 100% agree that less than half fit Notre Dame. And I've talked to people on the staff, people in the athletic department to try to nail down on like, because it's not the same number every year.
Yeah.
And what I hear is more like it's a third. So that technically is less than half, but it's less than half by quite a bit.
Right. And Notre Dame has learned, I mean, if they have indeed shifted their approach here, they've learned that, it's great to land a guy that, is a 5-star and everybody wants. I mean, maybe the last guy I'm thinking of, Noah Boykin, who they really took a chance on, and he didn't fit at Notre Dame, and that's fine. But you put a lot of resources you put a lot of resources into getting guys like that, and then if they have one foot out the door as soon as they get here, now you have a gap in your roster and you're making up ground. So
I think I would just say, like, if Notre Dame was presented with the opportunity to recruit Aaron Lynch again, I think 100% they would take him.
Yes, but I think it's important to note that class not graduated. That class had 7 players finish their eligibility at Notre Dame of the 23, the 2011 class.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the guys didn't fit.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like really the 2018 class is like kind of creeping up there as we go too. And I think
sure is the next one. Yeah.
I mean, I think the fit of those guys was much more curtailed and like edited to fit what Notre Dame wanted.
Easier to leave though too now.
Oh yeah. I mean, the grad transfer is like, you can sort of target that. If you're an early enrollee, you're probably grad transferring out with 2 years of eligibility if you do it right.
Right.
Yeah, because the NCAA is ultimately going to allow a one free transfer, so that the number
they'll make it even more so.
Absolutely. I mean,
and Dracovic knew he was going to get one. He might have stayed if he wasn't going to get that. You know, if he in 2011, Dracovic might not transfer out of Notre Dame because he might be like, I really want to sit out until 2013. Like that's a tough one.
Yeah, I thought Tommy Rees. I was very interested. I asked him a question about what he's looking for in intangibles and quarterbacks. Again, somebody said, well, Tommy Rees is making an excuse to pursue a lesser quarterback. Now, he was answering a question. That's all he was doing. And I thought, him talking about the various things that he looks into when he's, scouting out a quarterback. Does he watch football on Saturdays? Multi-sport guys, which is something that I've always believed in. I thought that was interesting. Other interesting things for you guys from Elston, Rees, Polian, or Freeman?
They laid out the sort of process of position coach to coordinator to head coach, or no, I'm sorry, area recruiter to position coach to coordinator to head coach. And I think that, in some ways, like that doesn't work with every prospect. It works with a lot of them. And I think ultimately that's probably what made the Tyson Ford story go a little sideways for them, is that the position coach was like really on it, and then it got to the coordinator. It didn't get to the head coach till later, but that's their process. It works with Aiden Gobera, no problem. The Ford story was just a little bit different, but I thought that was interesting. Everything you mentioned about Rees, I thought was good. I could have listened to him talk about quarterback evaluation development for like a couple hours. The Buck linebacker's no longer a thing, but Viper still is. So that
Viper's just too cool of a name to get rid of, Pete.
Yeah. Buck, a little bit too much like Big Buck Hunter, I guess. I'm not sure.
I picture Freeman walking in and saying, Viper, you guys call it Viper? All right, we're keeping that. He just thought that was better than Drop, right?
Yeah, apparently he talked to some players on the team, and it was like, Buck, what is that about? Yeah. That's out of here.
See, it does matter. It does matter more than we think. I just thought Elston, I think it's so interesting, Elston, how he has come into – he has a machine working since 2016. Before 2016, we would have looked at their defensive line recruiting, namely because the year before was the worst thing you've ever seen in your life, when you're like, Micah Treadway and Brandon Tiasum, and this is what you're bringing in.
Yeah, Elijah Taylor.
Elijah Taylor's the third. He went 5 for 5 in a class. And every time since then now, whether we're right or wrong, we're always like, boy, this guy that Mike Elston's in on, he's going to develop into a really good Viper, strong side end. Like, look at the last 4. Look at the last 4 that have come in January and in last year's class that have just signed. Is there anybody among those 4 you don't think Mike Elston will develop into a quality Viper or big end?
Well, that's why they have such they recruited such great length at that position.
I
mean, in Aupu and Schweitzer and Ford and Gobera. I mean, there's nobody under 6'5" there, and they're athletic.
And you've seen him develop guys now.
And Isaiah Foskey right before them. Right. So
Patello, I like the chances that they take. Schweitzer, Aupu in particular. I think more of like project kind of Ogundeji, Johnny Williams. I mean, if you want to go back to Bo Wallace, I guess you could. But like, I like those. Every year I would like them to take one guy like that. They probably took one more than they would have wanted, because in an ideal world they would have had David Abiara in this class, but his situation went sideways. But I love Ford. and the guy that just got Gobira
Yeah.
from over the weekend. Like, I love that combination of length and developmental, and one guy's maybe a little bit more ready to go. It's like I think Elston has done a really, really tremendous job sort of identifying and targeting, and then obviously recruiting too, and developing is the most important part.
Yeah, and the writing is on the wall for Jason Anya, because I mean, Mike Elson
280.
already says 280. So I mean, he's going to transition inside. That's something we've been talking about on Irish Illustrated since he verbally committed a long time ago. So the question then will be, which one of those four tall defensive ends that I was talking about ends up being a strong side, a big end. And I mean, maybe not necessarily, but I think if you were to choose between Apu and Schweitzer, Apu might be a little bit more likely, although I like what he does off the edge. Schweitzer is a true, drop end, because he was a linebacker.
Yeah, I was going to say he's played linebacker.
Right, they first recruited him as a linebacker, so he fits that spot perfectly. Tyson Ford, who will be a big end between Tyson Ford and Aiden Gobera? I'm not sure right now. I think Ford is probably a bigger frame with more gross size weight wise.
That was his coach in high school thought like 3 technique was very much inbounds.
Oh wow,
to where his genetics
he could
were
do that.
taking him.
He'd be really good at that position
too.
No doubt.
That position is important.
No doubt. Chris O'Leary, new Notre Dame safeties coach, kind of caught us by surprise a little bit.
I am definitely going to write Dan O'Leary at some point. So apologies in advance. Old school Notre Dame tight end when I started covering this team. I felt like it was probably a compromise between Taver Johnson and Kerry Cooks, and Chris O'Leary was in there too. And continuity is important. I think that one of the tells with O'Leary that is interesting is, I want to say it was before they had hired Mickens, and they sort of had a gap on the staff for a while. O'Leary actually went out and recruited, like went to California, visited high schools. So when Brian Kelly talks about sort of a 2-year job interview, part of that interview was the recruiting aspect of it. I don't know if there are any great takeaways from that, but it was enough to make me think like, all right, they really like this guy. Is it dissimilar to the process that they went from Scott Booker being promoted? Not really, but hopefully this one clicks a little bit better. Working with Freeman, working with Elston, working with Mickens. It's a pretty young defensive staff overall.
And we mentioned it, or I mentioned this offline. I do think it's an indication that Marcus Freeman preferred Chris O'Leary when it came down to O'Leary and Cooks.
Probably so.
I mean, I think it would be hard for Marcus Freeman to say, I want Kerry Cooks, for Brian Kelly to have his relationship with bringing Kerry Cooks back, and for them to sit both saying, but we're going to go with Chris O'Leary. That's just it's not impossible, but it's a strange jump, right?
No, but I think it kind of went unnoticed to all of us that he was actually coaching the Rovers during the fall. Now, maybe had it not been a pandemic, we would have had an opportunity to.
You got to be on the practice field. You got to be on the practice field to see that.
Right, exactly. So we would have seen that in August, and that would have made a difference. But we'll learn more about him. But good for him. And Nick Lazinski was the guy that we had talked about the most. Not sure what the future holds for him at Notre Dame, but we know that they respect him and like the work that he's done. I know Clark Lee certainly did. So anyway, let's come back in segment 2. We'll talk about another Notre Dame transfer, and we'll hit Notre Dame basketball at the end as well.
Thank you for listening to the Irish Illustrated Insider Podcast. If you enjoy our coverage of Notre Dame football, please consider supporting the podcast with a small donation. Go to irishillustrated.com/support. Your support will help Irish Illustrated continue to be the leader in coverage of Notre Dame athletics.
This is segment 2, burning up the boards. We start with a question from Wreckers 33 Hot. Brian Kelly chose not to take any questions at the National Signing Day press conference last week. What are your reactions to that as one, members of the media, and 2, what that says about Brian Kelly and Notre Dame?
A little surprised and nothing, I guess, is where I would go with that. I didn't read too much into it. So yeah, I just sort of left that one alone.
I was surprised until I realized what the call was about. And he talked about his class basically in December, and I'd much rather hear from the assistant coaches about the class than Kelly again, or any head coach on National Signing Day, because as I've said for a long time, National Signing Day, these players are all the best they'll ever be. And he once talked for 3 paragraphs about Cam Roberson. So I don't need to hear the head coach of anyone tell me how good the recruits are going to be. I thought it was good to be able to drill down with the assistants. However, I found it really weird. I mean, he doesn't have to give an overview, but I would have thought there would have been taking some questions.
Right. I think we were all caught by surprise.
Right. Maybe just say, I don't want to run down every player in the class who's already done that. But I'll take some questions here, general questions, but I really want to move on to my assistants.
Your new defensive coordinator.
Right.
Yeah, that was a little surprising, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, once we heard Brian Polian and Mike Elston's approach to what they were going to say, right, Tim? I mean, that's when it made sense that, okay, that's why Brian Kelly.
It was a presentation as much as it was like the last half was a press conference, the first half was a presentation.
No, I think I agree with you completely on that, Pete. What it says about Brian Kelly and Notre Dame, I mean, I know there are people out there that think all I do is defend Brian Kelly, and it's not true because if you've seen our work over the years, you know that it goes both ways. But I mean, it was an orchestrated effort to defend Brian Kelly, and that's why it happened. I was surprised that he didn't take any questions because I did want to ask some of the questions that I was getting pounded for not asking him. Mainly because we haven't been able to speak to him. And I just think that a lot of times we talk about recruiting from the standpoint like we know what's going on, but we don't because it's behind closed doors. By the same token, we totally know that Brian Kelly doesn't always push as hard as he needs to in recruiting. So, I mean, there's a balance there. And so once we started to hear the tone of the commentary, we weren't surprised by it.
ND Irishberg, all I hear about Tyler Buckner is that he could be a 3 to 4 year starter, and he's the top one Notre Dame has gotten in a while. Why was he not a 5-star, and what makes him such a great prospect?
Well, he was a 5-star at one point, right, for 24/7 Sports, and then he went through this mechanical change during the pandemic, and that's what surprised everybody. And then he didn't have a senior year, and I don't think California, some of the states are going to have a spring season starting here soon.
They're not. It doesn't seem like it.
California, I talked to Rick Meyer, who has his third son, his youngest son he's got a budding major college quarterback prospect, and he was hoping that they would get started, but there's a lot of doubt I don't think that's going to happen in California this spring. So, I mean, I think those two things. I think mainly the mechanical change is what prompted 24/7 Sports or the composite ranking to drop him from a 5 or a 4. It doesn't take much to drop from a 5 or 4 because there's so limited 5, so few 5 stars.
I agree with everything you said. And then not having a senior season, it's hard to move back up if you don't have that.
Yeah, and I can live with.
Yeah,
the recruiting service drops someone from a 5 to a 4-star because I don't care.
Okay, what makes him such a great prospect? I think that I think that everybody I haven't spoken to him. I know Tom and Kevin have. I mean, I think from the neck up, I think that there's a really special prospect there. I think he's a guy that gets it. I think he's a guy that's under control and will be able to handle the ups and downs of being a quarterback at Notre Dame. First and foremost, and he throws a good ball. I mean, generally speaking,
yes,
he's been really good when he's had a chance to play when there wasn't a pandemic or an injury involved. But for me, mentally, I think that he is a cut above most quarterbacks coming out of high school.
Having spent time with him and his family, I interviewed him at his house during his junior year when I was out there, like highly, highly self-aware. Yep. And I mean that in a 100% positive way, not in a I'm trying to present something because I know I'm something else. Like you sort of take him as he is, super smart, high achieving. Like I have no doubt in my mind that he will get everything out of what he has to offer to Notre Dame. I don't know how much that's going to be. I think it's going to be a lot, but I think he will max it out.
I think we're underrating his ability to throw the football.
No, that's probably
with athletic
true.
throws and athleticism too. I think he's a really good. Yeah, extremely high level. Athletic throws are really important. Everybody wants the modern game and everything. Notre Dame should never hand off again and have no tight ends and no running backs and just throw it. He is an incredibly good athlete in terms of being able to make the throws you need to make in the modern game with all the RPOs and everything.
I wish he was a little bit taller and still could do all those things, but he's not. And Pete, you know how I feel about self-awareness. I think that's if I could bestow a trait upon every person in mankind, it would be self-awareness. And
it'd be like if Malik Zaire had that self-awareness you were looking for, right, Tim?
He was a little short on that. Judge Arthur Vandelay, Tommy Rees leaned on a great offensive line, blocking tight ends, and Kyron Williams last season in a run-heavy offensive scheme. With an experienced offensive line returning, hypothetically a more talented wide receiver core, will the offensive philosophy shift to become more pass-heavy in 2021?
The question I wanted to ask Tommy Rees on Wednesday, but we were just talking about recruiting, so I didn't get it in. Also, a question for Brian Kelly. Everything I know about Rees is the answer is going to be yes, that it will shift, because that's what it doesn't mean they're going to start playing like old Houston style offense, but be much more pass heavy than it was last year, because that's where the strengths of the team are.
They lost 4 offensive linemen. I mean, you lost 4 offensive linemen. You're not going to line up and move everybody off the ball this year.
It's easier to pass block than it is run block.
It is. You lost 4 offensive linemen and the best blocking tight in the country. Yeah. That's why they ran all the time. That's why they ran all the time. How do people not? I think that Tommy Rees and Brian Kelly showed up. They looked around. They're like, let's see here. We have a Northwestern grad transfer that's tall. We have a 5th-year guy that's tall, and I'm wondering. And then we have 5 future pro linemen, a pro tight end coming in, and a smart quarterback. Do you think we should just throw the ball over the place and see if Keys is ready?
Again, you're absolutely right.
What are you talking about?
How many times have we heard that you want an identity and they have this rock solid offensive identity? And I get it, because you look at the national championship game, and you've got to score a lot of points to beat Alabama to win a national title, and I get that. But remember Brian Kelly said that if he asked Tommy Rees to go 5 wide, he would do that, but that's not who they were. I did statistically, Notre Dame ran the ball 42 times per game. They passed it 30 times per game. Ian Book ran it / got sacked 10 times per game. So the difference that's an average of 72 snaps a game, 42 rushes, 30 passes on average. I think that will come closer to the middle, where it is a 37, 35. If let's say they run the same amount of plays per game next year at 72, I could see it being 37 runs and 35 passes, or 38 and 34.
The best sometimes the run pass ratio is when you're a really good team, you run more than you pass because you run the clock out too.
True.
But when you look at Notre Dame's players,
Jack Cohn won't run as much as Ian Book either.
Right. And when you look at Notre Dame's players, you got to be hopeful that there's more strength in the wide receiver core than there was last year. They got the most they could out of Javon McKinley and Ben Skoranek, and they need to get a lot more out of the guys they have on the team.
My prediction, you'll hear the term extension of the running game next year.
A lot of throws to the running backs. Totally agree with you there, Pete. CMU Pens fan, if you had to bet on who wins the 2021 Asmar Bilal Award for senior contribution from the abyss, are you choosing Braden Lenzy, Tariq Bracy, or Houston Griffith?
Lenzy doesn't count. He's done it before.
That's who I picked.
You can't count Lenzy. He was a really, really good redshirt sophomore the second half of the season. Like, if he won, and I know Tim, you pointed out he was only good every other game. I hope he's great. I hope he's Braden Lenzy every other game.
That'd be fine.
The entire year. Throughout the entire year. There's no problem. That's a tough question. Could I pick somebody else?
Well, you can. And while you're
in the running, like DJ Brown.
Yeah.
Who else qualifies?
Well, the guy. Okay, I'll throw some guys. Cam Hart. I mean, there's an open starting position at cornerback. Maybe him. Paul Mawala coming off of an injury. George Takis moving up to the number 2 spot at tight end. Isaiah Pryor. There's an open. Lawrence Keys.
Yeah, I think I'd rather go Keys than. I just need to see. I mean, Bracy. I need to see Bracy rebuilt his entire confidence in fundamentals. Everything happened. Something happened. I don't know what happened.
Let me. I understand the nature of the question that Asmar Bilal Award, but he was a starter the year before, and he was 5th on the team in tackles. I realize that he wasn't an impact player in 2018, whereas he was in 2019.
What about Shane Simon?
It's got to stick with Keys. I'm going to stick with Keys.
Shane Simon's a good suggestion.
Yeah,
I think Keys is too. That's going to require a second defensive coordinator to see the assets that we never really saw with that, but Clark Lee did.
You know what? Houston Griffith is a great call. He doesn't have anybody trying to take his job from him yet until they get a grad transfer. Houston Griffith, elite. I mean, Lawrence Keys, as much as I've kind of always liked Lawrence Keys, I never thought he should play over Tommy Tremble, oddly enough. But he has to fight through Avery Davis, the second tight end, and other wide receivers. Houston Griffith has DJ Brown to compete against. Go get it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We've seen flashes of Lindsey. We've seen flashes of Bracey, and I still stand by Bracey having the opportunity to be a very good, a solid cornerback on the collegiate level. We haven't seen Houston Griffith be that.
No, we haven't. That's why I never considered him until that. But
maybe that's an out of the blue pick there.
Maybe we need to give CMU Penn fans some credit for making us turn our minds around 7 times and answering one question. That was pretty good. Hooks_Orpik. Who are the best candidates for a big jump this offseason by a young player, kind of like Kyron Williams last year? Those are more fun. We just say names.
First of all, I don't think anybody's going to have the impact that. Well, I take that back. I mean, Kevin Austin Jr. certainly is in a position, or Jordan Johnson, more so Austin because he's been in the program. I mean, those guys absolutely are in a position to have the type of impact that, Kyron Williams, 211 carries, 1,125 yards, 13 rushing touchdowns.
I'm going to go Kevin Bauman for this one. True red shirt, kind of like Kyron Williams. I think he could be a number 2 tight end, and the running with Takis there. And I just know the staff thinks very highly of him. So I'm going to go with him.
Can I say Tyree or too good?
No.
Okay.
Come on. Including Lindsey in the last one, you can't.
Yeah, that's true.
There you go.
Valid. All right. So I'm going to go Johnson then because Austin's a senior and I refuse to be like Brian Kelly and call him a young player.
Okay. It does say young. I'm sorry. It does say young. Okay. Young's not in there. I don't care though, man.
Yeah. You're going Austin. Austin's a great choice.
Well, I think Austin has a ton of ability. All he has to do is A, do the right thing, and B, don't break your foot again, which of course he had no control over that.
That has become harder.
Yeah. Good. Go ahead, Tim.
Dylan Murphy, 0-2. As it stands right now, name the starting offensive line for the Florida State game from left to right. Which is the one 2020 lineman you'd like to have back on the 2021 team?
Okay, left tackle, Jarrett Patterson. He's going to play there. Center, Zeke Corral. Did I miss somebody? Yeah, center, Zeke Corral. I would say Dylan Gibbons right now at right guard, although we haven't officially heard that he's coming back for a 5th year. And then Lug at right tackle. Left guard, Baker, Kristofic, Carroll, Spindler. I've always liked Dirksen. I think maybe the time has come and gone.
You have to drop the affinity at this point for your.
Yeah, I mean, I just having. I've heard he has some technique issues. I think I've mentioned that in the past. So I don't know. I think that left guard spot. I think there's one that's wide open, and the right guard Gibbons has an advantage because he'd be a redshirt senior.
I agree with your lineup, and I'll just answer the second question. That makes Aaron Banks the easy choice for the guy you want back.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. Aaron Banks coming back would be great. I agree with the 4 starters. I don't know if Gibbons will be left or right guard. Probably depends on who the other guard is. Because he was a left guard until he had to be a right guard.
Right. Yeah.
But I don't think it matters that much. He can obviously play both. So we have to guess one, right? I will say Gibbons left guard and Quinn Carroll right guard.
Okay.
Because I don't want to be too exciting and fun in February and say Rocco Spindler. We're going to save that for August.
Yeah, and with Patterson, I guess Patterson could play 2 more years. I mean, they're not going to, if Tosh Baker's capable, they're not going to keep him on the bench for 2 years, right?
Right. I would think Patterson would play 2 more years since he's moved
2 more.
positions. Right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. You got to.
Yeah.
That's how you get your draft stock, is to be a really good left tackle for 2 years.
Question
Maybe-
from
Go ahead, Tim.
Question from Kay Beasley. Do you think grad transfers will occur prior to spring practice, or does the staff want to wait and see where they are at certain positions?
I mean, we're kind of past them happening in winter now. So if they're going to happen, they're going to happen in spring, because at that point, those players will have a little more clarity on doing the graduation before doing the transfer. And it's worth reminding people every time this topic comes up that Nick McLeod announced his commitment in May, and we're still a few months away from that.
Yeah, Nick McLeod, Trevor Spates, and Everett Golson all announced their grad transfers in May because they graduated in May and then they grad transferred.
Yeah,
so that helps too.
Ben Skoranek announced his on January 1st, and when did Jack Cohn?
January
4th.
But it was early. Yeah, it was early.
But Ben Skoranek was a graduate. He was leaving. Like Nick McLeod had to graduate still, and Everett Golson had to graduate still.
Yeah.
Trevor Spates had to graduate still. Sometimes you have to, just because you announce it. I mean, like Ben Skoranek was on campus at Notre Dame right after he announced his, and Isaiah Pryor was able to come to campus. Remember, they were involved in winter workouts.
Right.
McLeod had to finish his collegiate career. I mean, his university studies at NC State.
Everybody's different. I talked to Jack Lamb on Friday, I think it was, and I was assuming when I called him, I would be talking to him in Boulder, Colorado, but he still has a semester to finish at Notre Dame, and then he'll be a Buffalo at the end of May.
And people probably, just to throw really quickly on that, I'm sure he is thinking, because people always transfer from schools during the spring when they find out where they're on the depth chart. Those are usually regular transfers, kind of like like Devontae Neal and who transferred along with him, the wide receiver, the same freshman year. Yeah, Ferguson. They're like, "Oops, I don't like where this is going." Talk to the coach. Coach tells you, "Yeah, I agree. I don't like where it's going." You go.
Yep.
I don't think that's grad transfer quite as often. And Jeffers, do you expect further significant transfers leaving other than what's already been announced? The board has been prone to bedwetting over Jordan Johnson and Xavier Watts. Are we in the clear?
Has Notre Dame had significant transfers?
So far, I think I would say significant, but they're not. It's significant grad transfers of guys who are just looking for playing time somewhere else that wasn't going to happen at Notre Dame.
I mean, I think the closest to a significant grad transfer would be a Gofu. Although I think Jack Lamb.
We like Jack Lamb, the player.
I think Jack Lamb, the football player, is a good football player, but he was 4th on the depth chart.
I feel like Isaiah Rutherford was one that kind of surprised me. That was just a straight transfer. I'm not playing here. I just need something else.
I think any DB that transferred when they knew the defensive back coach was leaving was kind of strange, right?
Yeah. I mean, so sometimes these transfers don't make sense.
Yeah, and just to remind everybody, the list of guys that were on the roster when the 2020 season started that are no longer, and again, this is going to continue, man.
Yeah,
it is going to expand when the NCAA gives a non-penalized one-time transfer to everybody. Kofi Wardlow, Isaiah Rutherford, Jack Lamb, Jahmir Smith, Jamian Franklin, Jafar Armstrong, Ovia Gofu, Jordan Jemarkeith, which we kind of forget that he was even on the roster when the season started, and then now Micah Jones along with him. So, I mean, I think Gofu is the most significant because he was getting significant snaps against Alabama.
Yeah.
I think we may have talked about it last week. I mean, I was a little surprised at Texas, but I guess I'm told that Texas is wide open for weak side pass rushers. So
yeah, they lack linebackers and DNs apparently.
Yeah, right.
Buster Biven. What world do we live in, by the way, that Texas can't get linebackers and DNs and Notre Dame can't stop recruiting 6'6" rangy defensive ends to play Viper and newly named positions? Buster Biven, what have you heard about the early enrollee and their level of physical preparedness? Also, what's your over-under on 2.5 freshman defensive backs in the 2 deep at Tallahassee? We are resetting the line to 1.5 because we don't think 2.5 is close.
we never really clarified the question of the previous question was, are we in the clear? I mean, we're not aware of anybody that is going. Kendall Abdur-Rahman is a guy that is kind of without a position. We don't know, but anyway, getting back to your question, Tim. I think it was to see Blake Fisher with the other 13 early enrollees, the massiveness of that, I mean, he makes Rocco Spindler look small.
I love the picture that Kevin put up on the site. I was like, which one's Fisher? It's just so much
My
bigger than everybody
goodness.
else. It was incredible.
I remember I went to see him work out. I think it was before the NFL Combine about this time last year because I was down in Indianapolis and he did a morning workout and I just was standing next to him and like he's just huge.
Well, it's like
he's
Aaron,
like
he's like Aaron Banks.
He's like Aaron Banks.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. He's that level of size. So yeah, I don't know if that means like he's physically ready to play, but I can tell you he's massive.
Aaron Banks measured at the Senior Bowl, I want to say 6'5", maybe 6'4", but he was 336, and that's about where Blake Fisher is.
Yeah,
but we know that Rocco Spindler's a man, and he looks small next to Blake Fisher. But I think Gabriel Rubio physically is a guy that comes in very impressive. Spindler is as well. And we mentioned it early, Schweitzer and Pugh, the length that they have, along with Foskey and Tyson Ford and Gobera, the present and the future, they've really upgraded how these guys look on the eye test coming in.
Justin Walters looks like more than a 17-and-a-half-year-old incoming safety as an early enrollee, doesn't he?
I thought he was shorter than he actually is, which is it's usually the other way around. It's great.
Yeah, sure is. Yeah.
That's a great surprise because we know how physical of a player he is.
The over-under on the freshman, I tried to write it out real fast. My guess would be Lewis, Bracey, Griffith Hamilton, Brown, a freshman corner, a non-freshman corner, and a player to be named later that will transfer in who I hope becomes a starter.
Yeah, I sort of wrote it down as like I could see a freshman in the two deep at safety. I don't know if that's
exactly
Walters.
because there are three spots really.
Yeah.
I mean, Griffith, Brown, and Hamilton.
Corner, I'm not.
Riley would have to be the freshman corner there.
I guess I feel like the way to explain this is like if a freshman is in the two deep at corner, that's probably a good thing.
Yes, he beat out.
He passed some guys that they liked.
It would be a good thing, but it'd be a bad thing for the sophomore class with Ramon Henderson and and Caleb Alford. I mean, again, in a perfect world, I know we're always looking for the shiniest new toy, but in a perfect world, you want a redshirt freshman to.
I don't know. The way Clarence Lewis played and the way, I know Julian Love's a bad example. The way Julian Love played and Troy Pride even, I feel like if Philip Riley comes in and he's just better than those guys, you're like, you know what? That's good. He's better than them.
No, I hear you.
Yeah,
I get it if one stands out above the other, but the process, the process.
I mean, they've got what 9 corners on the roster.
Yeah,
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
I guess JoJo Johnson's not here.
They're gonna have They're gonna have 9 if you include Barnes, Tim.
Correct. Yeah. Right.
I have a follow-up question on the podcast that I'm just going to throw in. Tim O'Malley from Granger writes in, do you think they will get a grad transfer corner now? Because I did the early enrollee thing and I counted up all the corners. I don't know if Notre Dame's going to be in the market if they have 9 with Barnes. Because I know you can move Barnes to safety, but then you have 7 safeties.
I would.
I would too, but you got to get a McLeod, right?
Yeah, I mean that's
yes. You're not. I'd rather not fill in my 2 deep with my 4th corner being a grad transfer that happens to have played some football for UAB or something along those lines.
The equivalent of Freddie Canteen or Avery Sebastian, where there's a really chronic
but if you get a Nick McLeod, who the first time we all looked at his tape were like, oh, that guy's starting,
right? But you don't want the Freddie Canteen coming to start. I'd rather develop a freshman and
that's got to be a plug and play guy that you bring in. I agree. If Ryan Barnes is a safety, there are 8 corners and 8 safeties heading into the fall as of right now. Dan_Brian21. Tim, why don't you ask this question, actually, please?
Probably the toughest loss of the men's basketball season at Georgia Tech Saturday. I like Prentice Hub, but when will Mike Bray tell him that the team is better when he's getting assists and running the offense rather than taking 15 to 20 shots a game, especially as a 39% shooter?
Okay, some things have changed in the last 6 games. Of the last 6 games, Prentice Hub has had 10 assists 3 times and 9 assists 2 times. And he's 20 for 41 from 3 in the last 6 games. So he's averaging 8.5 assists per game and 16 points per game. He's distributing the basketball much better than he did. So I get it because we all have kind of the same general impression of Prentice Hubb's game. I think he's too loose with the basketball, but what he's done the last 6 games, I think he's done a great job of striking the balance between being a distributor and being a scorer.
Yeah, Hub was not the issue. He got shut down the second half in terms of scoring, but he was the reason Nate Laszewski had 17 dunks or whatever he had there in the second half because
Right.
it was all Hub's pick and roll passes to wide open Laszewski, who also played great basketball. Hub, and also I got to give Hub credit for not throwing up the world's worst shot when he was triple teamed in transition to try to win the game, and he found an open Cormac Ryan who didn't pull the trigger. I mean, that was a good pass by Hub. Ryan, I don't mind the shot fake, but he shot fake and then ran into traffic. You have to shot fake and go to the basket, or shot fake and step to your right. And he should have just risen it.
I wanted to see Cormac Ryan shoot that shot at that time.
Yeah, Hub has always offended my delicate sensibilities watching point guards, but the last 6 games he has been a guy where I have to admit, like, man, he's playing better basketball right now.
He is seeing the court. The only thing I would really complain about is there's still those times where he doesn't need to make a foolish turnover. He doesn't need to make a haphazard, let's see what happens here. But I think he's played really, really well the last 3 games.
Yeah.
We'll conclude with ACTG Teach. If you were sent to a desert island and could only take 1 season of Notre Dame football tape, not sure that would be at the forefront of what.
That's all you get, Tim. That's all you get.
How are you going to watch it?
VCR for my case right
what
here.
football season would it be? And also, you can either take sweets like cakes and pies or sunblock. What are you taking?
I would take chips over sweets, but sunblock over chips. Sunblock's important. I am going to go. This is an easy answer. I don't know if people read enough O'Malley's Monday Musings or mailbags here, guys, but in 1990, the end of that 3-year run, you get to watch Notre Dame play number 4 Michigan, number 24 Michigan State, and that's the immaculate deflection that young Mr. Pete Sampson likes to talk about with Adrian Gerald. Number 2 Miami, number 9 Tennessee, number 18 Penn State, number 18 USC, and number 1 Colorado. That's an enjoyable little stretch of sitting on your VCR in Fiji, watching the Irish with sunblock and no treats.
Stranded in Fiji.
I'm with you on all of those things. I'm just trying to imagine doing this like in the Swiss Family Robinson house. And then I think it'd be quite enjoyable. You could go out for an ostrich ride and then come back and watch the next game. It could be a lot of fun.
I've got a lot of choices here for former great Notre Dame teams. I'd have to say 88 because it's the one national championship during my working days. 39 years, one national championship. I didn't think that was going to be the case after 1988. As far as sunblock or cakes, give me a break.
Tim loves his cakes, so
feed me my sugar intravenously.
You're gonna walk it off. You got an island, right?
Yeah,
you're fine.
Yes, I do things to compensate for that, but man, kind of hard to turn down the sugar.
Tim got mad at me for saying I could turn down baked goods for the rest of my life on a recent podcast.
See?
Yeah, that's it. I like the idea. VCR too.
All right, we got it covered, guys. That'll do it for today. We appreciate you joining us for Irish Illustrated Insider. We'll be back on Monday, February 15th for our next edition. Thanks for joining us.